producer, filmmaker and visual artist Patten is collaborating with generative AI systems in new, exploratory ways.
The record Mirage FM was the first release made with text-to-audio sound samples. And I produced that in this kind of flurry of activity. As soon as I found out that this process was even possible, I got really stuck into just hours and hours and hours of experimentation with very little sleep, just generating these things, wondering even whether the tool would be available in 24 hours. You know, you just never know with these things. I think one of the strange aspects of working with AI tools is that the algorithms change as well. So there could be something that you kind of figure out, you know, 1 week, but then if the algorithm changes, the system won't behave in the same way, in a replicable way down the line. So there's always this kind of odd thing about the transience of the tools, as well as something very strange, and I would say almost sort of magical, about the interplay between human thought and machine thought. I guess the process of creating sounds in a really exploratory way is what led to Mirage FM. So I didn't sort of sit down thinking, okay, I'm going to make a record now. I was just thinking, okay, like, what can I get this thing to do? You know, what can I explore within its space? A lot down the line, I ended up using the term crate digging in latent space as a way to describe what it was that kind of led to this record. I mean, obviously, it's been 2 years since that process happened. The development in these AI audio generation tools has just been completely crazy. And I think, obviously, it's kind of entered into the public discourse in a very different way as well, because, you know, there's all sorts of conversation happening about data sets and the ethics of training the models and so on, which is obviously really, really important. But at that time, it was much more of a sort of a niche thing that was going on. So I wanted to find a way to describe the process that was not too techy and kind of use ideas and systems, I suppose, that people are used to. So yeah, I came up with this term, crate digging in latent space.
And how did these sounds that he created with written language become an album?
Yeah, I mean, it was built from, you know, hundreds and hundreds of short sound samples that I kind of layered up and sort of stitched together in a very sort of forensic way, you know, after that first process of kind of trawling through and generating things. And I wanted to kind of keep the seams visible. I wanted the listener to kind of be able to perceive that it was a kind of collage. So not to hide. I think one of the things about technology is that, I guess, as time's gone on, often it's harder to see what's actually going on. So if we look at the theremin, it's very clear what's going on. You know, a child could understand it very quickly and kind of interact with it. Same with many of the tools, you know, there are buttons, there are sliders, and they have some kind of indexicality about their use or the meaning of why they're there and why they are how they are. Whereas when you kind of get into the black box of software, it's very hard to know what's actually going on under the hood. So I wanted to kind of let the album work as a kind of a conceptual way into this sort of new frontier of production that I could see unfolding ahead. I think that these AI audio tools have kind of been made for various different reasons. They're not all benevolent, you know. It's hard to talk about them without acknowledging the ethics behind the production of these tools and what the ideology is based in, which is, you know, saving time and cost and labor. You know, all of these things are sort of woven into these systems. And I think there is a sort of tyranny within them, which does mirror that held elsewhere. So within the music industry, within the way that capitalism works, within an increasingly polarized society. It's not that these ideologies embedded within generative AI systems have arrived from generative AI systems. They mirror the kind of dominant ideology held elsewhere. So I think it's really important to note that. But I also hope that by finding ways to kind of misuse these tools can both highlight what they are and, kind of keep a light on under the hood and step away from that apparent seamlessness of the way that culture often comes at us, and also to kind of serve as some kind of critique of those ideologies that are kind of embedded within those systems. I've always been interested in new technologies, new ways of expressing things, but I'm also very aware that the relationship with sort of tech and, Silicon Valley and all of that is one that cannot be ignored. It's really important. So I'm not like a sort of techno optimist. I'm not sort of pro or against AI. I'm interested in all sorts of new technologies. And I think happening to be alive at a time when this is all happening, it would seem wrong to not explore those and speak about them in hopefully sort of three-dimensional way that does acknowledge all of those facets. The idea of misusing the instrument in this particular case is both potentially interesting sonically and in service of creating new forms of aesthetic and sensation, but then also as a form of political critique and, if you like, activism.
Which feels like a good place to pause and take a breath.
I think Ableton, computers and AI raise so many interesting questions. And there were some moments in that final piece from Patten when he used words like magic, which cropped up when we were talking about the theremin, crate digging, which links back to the MPC and Technics 1200s. And he talked about misusing this new tool. And it made me think that we are at a new frontier. But the creative opportunities and problems are the same, aren't they? And it's our privilege as artists to try and answer them.
That's really true, although I think that the physicality of these objects, their tactile, playful nature, is something that keeps cropping up. And I haven't seen that marrying of AI and physicality quite yet. Maybe that's a good thing.
We've covered so much ground in this 4-part series, Rich, and it's inspired me to go back to my studio and start playing with all those instruments I haven't picked up in a while.
I know, and I can only think of all the stuff we didn't get around to chatting about. We touched on the 303 and mentioned the Buchla synthesizer, but I'd love to do a whole episode on those.
Yeah, that'd be great. And we definitely owe it to all those people who play pianos, guitars and violins to dig deep into the acoustic instrument world, but maybe in a slightly nerdy instrumental way. Well, maybe next time. But for now, you can catch up with all the episodes on BBC Sounds. I've been Hannah Peel.
And I've been Richard Norris. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.